Now that I've been playing Splatoon 2 for a couple years, I've run into a number of players who haven't really played competitively before, but are more than competent enough to do it. What's stopping them? Well, as we'll discuss in this video, there are actually quite a few things that they need to think about, but the obstacle they fixate on is finding a team. We're going to talk about why you might want to get a team together, how to go about doing it, and a bit about what a healthy team looks like, so you know if you need to look for a new one. While this video will be centered around Splatoon 2 teams, and I may reference a few resources that are specific to that scene, this largely applies to any game, or even other kinds of teams and relationships. Maybe even dating? Huh. A lot of this video actually applies to dating. Just use a little analytical thinking, and I'm sure everything we talk about here can be useful to you regardless of what game you play or what task you're working to complete. Playing solo ranked is easy. As long as you have the hardware and the internet connection to do it, you can play whenever you want for however long you want, and stop and start whenever you want. You only have to meet your own standards. So if you feel like pushing yourself, you can, but if you want to take it easy, the only people complaining about it are random strangers on the internet. And in Splatoon, unlike other games, you can't even hear them whining at you. You can switch between trying hard and taking it easy mid-match if you really want to. If you do the same thing over and over again without ever learning from your mistakes, the only consequence you face is that your rank doesn't increase. And it can be easy for anyone to rationalize that away as being their randomly chosen teammate's fault, or the result of a poorly designed ranking system, or whatever other excuse.
I should block this entire team too. Really should.
Frankly, playing solo will only get you so far. Zero, the first North American player to break 3000 X power, has been playing on competitive Splatoon teams for years. This team experience got him further than anyone else ever had in solo queue. That's because, despite having no communication with your teammates, Splatoon is still a team game, and you learn the skill of being a good teammate from playing with teammates who can communicate. Most of the players I know in the upper ranks of solo queue who haven't joined a team yet are beginning to realize that a team would be rewarding for them. They don't need me to tell them. But a lot of them will balk at the logistical issues involved. It's like the difference between hitting a tennis ball against your garage door and arranging with a friend to meet at a tennis court away from your home. Playing with someone else is a bigger time commitment. You need someone other than you to be on the same page. It's a little bit more expensive. Even if those concerns don't affect you, if one player is way stronger than the other and isn't making the effort to coach the weaker player, it can end up not being very rewarding for either of them. Playing with other people is a lot harder to set up successfully, and that stops a lot of people from wanting to put in the effort to try it. This is why parks and rec departments set up leagues for people and build courts and hire coaches and referees. They have an interest in people getting out and being active, and removing these barriers to participation, even if they may seem small, makes it much more likely to happen. One big advantage esports have over traditional sports is that you don't need your community to bulldoze a huge area of land and put painted clay over the top of it to be able to play your game. You just need a video game console and a stable internet connection. Frankly, the barriers of getting a little organized and meeting people are not too difficult for you to overcome if you have the time to grind through solo queue. The small extra investment of time and effort is not going to disrupt your life or cause you a ton of undue stress if having played the game for hundreds of hours didn't do that already. You shouldn't worry about whether you're good enough at the game yet. Recreational team sports can have some really unathletic people playing for them and still have a good time and get a lot out of the experience. It happens in a lot of competitive environments that people go to a tournament and get floored by the level of play you see from strong competitive teams and feel inadequate. But every one of those strong teams has gone through this. Every player who is now cracked was at one point a scrub getting dunked on. No matter how inexperienced you are, if you love the game and you communicate effectively, you should be able to find a team situation you're comfortable with. Step 1. Figure out your goals. A lot of Splatoon players, and people in general, don't think enough about this step when they're looking for teammates. What does being on a perfect team feel like? What do you get out of being on that team? Why is it exciting to you? The answers to these questions are different for different people, and that will lead you to look for different things in your teammates. A lot of newer players will look up to their favorite streamers, idols of the gaming community, the top players in the world, and end up with, I want to be the best team in the world. And in some cases, that's a great idea. I support the hell out of someone who can take that goal and really try their hardest to make good on it. That's inspiring, but that takes some serious sacrifices, and you need to love the game enough to want to do that. Being the best in the world might easily mean you're practicing at least 6 hours every single day, and it's very thoughtful practice that includes just as much studying the game as it does playing the game. You have to do drills. Ever played an athletic sport where your coach made you pass the ball a certain way or move around cones as quick as you could? The boring part of practice that you didn't like because you just wanted to play? Yeah, you're gonna have to do those. Those make you better faster. You need an army of coaches and peers and lab monsters feeding you data about the game that you can use to get an edge. Here's a whole conversation consisting only of PPMD, legendary Super Smash Bros. Melee player, having nerdy conversations with his orbit of Melee analysts. Just kidding, it's the 450th page. Some of you haven't even read a book that long. You also need support from the people who are close to you to go after goals like that. Not everyone's parents or significant others are okay with them playing a video game for that long every day. You need to make sure your grades aren't slipping up, or that your performance at work isn't suffering if you're not leaving all of that to play professionally. You have to confront every personal weakness you have daily, and be able to sit with knowing that you're going to screw up, that you're going to have to own that you screwed up, and do the painful work to get better. Not everyone wants that. It's okay not to want that. You can still be a positive contributing member of the community without wanting that. Maybe your goal is just to express yourself through your play. Maybe your goal is to inspire newer players to pick up competitive Splatoon for themselves. Maybe your goal is to get as far as you can with a specific weapon or strategy so that you can show other players what it can do. Maybe you want to learn enough to be a coach for other teams. Maybe you aim to be a successful streamer or commentator or tournament organizer or some other role in the community. Maybe your only goal is to make some friends, and you couldn't care less how far you make it in the bracket as long as that happens. And maybe you do want your team to improve, but maybe you can be happy not being the best in the world. Maybe you want to be the best that you all can be with just 2 2-hour practice sessions every week. Knowing your goals is everything when you're looking for teammates. If you don't know these things about yourself, choosing teammates that you can succeed and have a good time with comes down to dumb luck. Step 2, put yourself out there. Once you've got a realistic set of goals and some plans for how to meet them, now you need to go shout into the void and see if somebody hears you.
Is there anyone alive out there?
You're going to get a post together for Discord and Twitter summarizing who you are and what you're looking for. The more objective data and specifics, the better. What weapons do you play? What time zone do you live in? And when are you available to practice? How often do you want to practice? Write a little blurb about these goals that you figured out for yourself in step 1. That's great information for prospective teammates to see, and it will reflect your maturity that you sat down and thought your goals through. Most people will post their age here. This is something that should give you pause, since there are safety concerns with giving too much of your personal information on the internet. It's a relatively low risk since you're giving your gamer tag instead of your real name, and you're not posting pictures of yourself or giving specific information about your location or anything, but it is a risk all the same. The reason to give your age is so that you end up in a group of people with a similar maturity level that's more likely to get along. Mixed age levels can work. My team has a range from age 16 to 26, which is pretty big, but the younger players have a maturity level that lets them get along with adults. It's also extremely important in a group like that for the younger player's activity to be monitored by parents or guardians. Not every adult you encounter online is going to be interacting with children for the right reasons. Maybe just post that you're looking for a team where everyone is over or under 18 if you don't want to give your own age, but the age range matters to you. List your ranks and X powers if applicable. If you've played on a team before, name that team and list their division in Lookin, or your region's equivalent if you're not in North America. If the team didn't compete in a league like that, say so, but estimate where they would have been ranked as accurately as possible. Yes, accurately, don't exaggerate. You can estimate using results from tournaments against teams that were a part of those leagues. If you're new to competitive play, say so. That might sound like something that would turn people off, but it's going to come up at some point. At least this way, if someone sees your post and still says yes to it, you know that it won't be an issue later on down the line. This way, you know your teammates are willing to invest resources in helping a new player get up to speed. If you know any competitive players or streamers, definitely talk to them and maybe ask them to retweet your post. Even if their team isn't right for you, they've got connections. Connections are fantastic. People are much more comfortable choosing someone who knows them, or someone that they know and trust says is good for them. Also true in job hunting and dating, by the way. To use my team as an example, I met Devi through her friend's Splatoon stream, Cookie and Sam joined after being longtime viewers and having played Splatoon 1 competitively with each other, and Ninga joined after we played on a pickup team together at a LAN. Toxic is pretty much the only member of the team that I met through happenstance in a public community Discord server. Put a lot of energy into developing your connections and keeping up positive relationships with the people you know. It can make finding a team much easier. If you're brand new and don't have as many connections, it's never too late to start developing them by frequenting competitive Twitch streams and Scrim servers, but you probably still want to make a public post. Using a public community Discord's free agent channel is kind of like the part of looking for a job or scrolling through a dating app that really sucks and everybody hates. There are a lot of people looking out there, but you have to be good to yourself. Pick people that are right for you. Just because you finally find someone who says yes to your proposal doesn't mean you should immediately join them. Play some tryout matches with them, where you get to be a part of their team during a scrim. This isn't just about how well you play. In fact, unless there's a huge mismatch in skill between teammates, that's not what you should be focusing on at all. If you get nervous, the thought that you need to play well to get on this team will only make you more nervous and play worse. Instead, think about how well the team works together, what the quality of their communications during games is, whether you're having fun, whether you think these people would make good friends. If you ask for help, do you get it? When they ask you for something, can you do what they asked? Most people are really intimidated the first time they go through this. They're worried they're not good enough, and as soon as anyone says yes to them, they're super relieved and stop giving any consideration to whether that partnership is good for them. This is one of those parts that also applies to dating. Resist this feeling and hold out for a team you think will be good for you. By the way, I know it brings a few more challenges with it, and it might feel a bit scary, but you can form your own team from scratch instead of joining an existing one. It's a lot easier to have these conversations about your goals and team norms when none of those goals and norms exist yet. This way, you have more influence over that conversation, and you're more likely to get what you're looking for. Step 3. Building your team. You will almost certainly not mesh perfectly with your teammates day one of your partnership. It's going to be awkward and new and nervous and uncomfortable sometimes. You'll need to set boundaries when someone does something that bothers you, and you'll probably do something that bothers someone else and have to learn to respect their boundaries. A little of this is normal, and as long as everyone is willing to make some changes to reach a happier equilibrium, it's not a sign that you should just abandon ship right away. It'll get better the more you work at it. If you wrote down goals for yourself and looked for teammates based on those goals, stick to them. Hold yourself and your teammates accountable to whatever you've agreed about. You can get a lot of that across in your free agent posts and tryouts and whatnot, but make no mistake, those goals are still being negotiated the entire time you're on a team. You may learn more about what you want out of the team as you go, and if you ever realize you want something, bring it up with your team. Lots of players don't think about this. They assume everyone is on the same page and get surprised when someone expects them to practice more or less or differently. This can make it even more difficult to have the awkward conversations that you need to really hold each other accountable and commit to meeting your goals. This whole time, I've been leaving it ambiguous whether I'm talking about team captains or not. I think everyone on the team should take at least some responsibility for leading each other, but usually there will be a member or two on a team who takes on more of a leadership role than the others do. This player or two is who you designate as the player to contact during tournaments, and the one who organizes scrims and suggests events to compete in, and makes sure everyone knows when to show up. A lot of the time, no one asked to be in this position. They just kind of ended up there by accident. So team captains for less experienced teams are learning their jobs on the fly. To those of you doing that, first of all, let me say that you're doing good work that your team should appreciate. If you feel like they're taking you for granted and not appreciating the extra effort you're making so they don't have to, that's a red flag. Secondly, I need to make a little disclaimer here that I am not the captain of my own team. I probably could do a decent job if I had to take the reins myself, but I'd need to make some adjustments. I'd need to become a lot more planful and more consistent. Devi is our acting team captain, and she is really excellent at her job. I'll go over some general advice here, but for very specific questions, I would just send you to her. As a captain, you're in charge of setting the tone for your team activities, giving your team a sense of momentum and direction. Remember those goals we keep talking about? At all times, even just in team conversations, be thinking right this second, are we doing something that will help us make progress towards those goals? And if the answer is no, look to redirect everyone's attention. If you're in team practice making an effort to improve in preparation for a tournament and someone's playing a weapon they would never play in tournament to mess around, enforce your boundaries. Ask them why they're playing it, and if they don't have a good answer, confront them about how they're not taking practice as seriously as you expect them to. It doesn't matter if that's the best player on your team and you're the weakest. If you expect them to be working to improve, they need to work to improve. That's not to say your job is to hold your teammates' feet to the fire all the time. Remember that your team's goals might just include making new friends and enjoying yourselves. Even on teams with strict competitive goals, it's important to spend some time bonding. Teams that don't get along with each other usually aren't worth being on. Setting aside time to play some casual games together and just hang out is a great idea. But it should be very clear to everyone when it's serious practice time and when it's casual fun time. If your players oscillate back and forth between the two during practice and lose focus, they'll be inconsistent and it'll show in your tournament results. Sometimes players just won't be a good fit for each other as teammates. Maybe they came across differently during tryouts than they do now that you're playing with them regularly. Maybe you agreed to one of their goals, but the more you work toward it, the more you realize that's not what you really want. Maybe someone on your team just did something really hurtful and mean. These are some good reasons for why a team might remove a member or break up. Typically in these situations, it's up to the captain to lead the conversation with the players involved. If the group is breaking up, this should be a team conversation. If you're considering removing a player, the captain should make sure that the rest of the team agrees before doing this on their own, but they should have a private conversation with just that player. In this conversation, establish the problem and explain where you think it's coming from. Give objective, detailed descriptions. For example, you're not taking practices seriously enough is a good start, but you make a stronger case if you include, last night you were just playing GooTuber instead of your usual frontline weapons while the rest of us were trying our best, or I organized a scrim because you told me you'd be there. I thought we had enough players, but then you didn't show up and we had to cancel on them. That makes us a lot less likely to get scrims in the future because now they think we're flaky. If they seem receptive to what you're saying and willing to change, you might decide to give them a second chance and see if they improve over the course of the next week or so. If they seem like they're making a good faith effort to be better, that's great. You've now made your team stronger. There may be some slip-ups here and there, and when they happen, always remind them of their commitment to correct them. But if their heart doesn't seem to be in it, and they're falling back on old habits even after you remind them, it might be time to make good on your ultimatum and dismiss them from the team. Nobody likes having these conversations, but it's much better to cut off a broken relationship early than to let it get worse and worse and eat away at what's good about your team. Sometimes you've just got to fire someone. Sometimes you've just got to break up with someone who you think is pretty cute. Are you seeing what I meant about this video being really relevant to dating? If you're the team captain, it's your responsibility. Don't beat around the bush too much. Word the message carefully, restate your reasons for doing it, but tell them that you're letting them go and hit send. Don't make a stink over it. Don't go to Twitter ranting about how terrible they are. Even if they actually, committed a serious crime, there's a clear line between warning the rest of the community about someone who's malevolent and gross, petty attention grabbing. Remember that connections matter. Sometimes a team breaks up for good reasons that don't reflect negatively on anyone involved. Two of the very best teams in all of North America just broke up recently, and it wasn't because any of them hate each other or anything. Maybe you end up with a former teammate or two on a new team or pick up later on down the line, or they recommend you to someone else who's good for you. Even if you do think they were in the wrong and don't plan on playing with them ever again, it's not worth it to try and get other people to hate them. Just dismiss them firmly, decisively, and calmly, and move on. Step 4. Keeping a team together. My team is really out of the ordinary with regard to how long we've been together. Many of our friends have been on 2 or even 3 different teams in the 2 years that we've stayed on the same team. Even then, there's been a lot of turnover. We started with 4 members, ballooned up to 7, dropped to 5, and now we're sitting at 6. By my count, 10 or 11 different players have been part of it now. Things happen, life gets in the way, people come and go. But I do think our team has something important that keeps us close. The best way that I can describe it is that we're committed to each other. Commitment means that you're not considering other options. You just decide, I'm going to stick with the team I've got right here, right now, and make the best of it, instead of hesitating and wondering if it could be better. We've seen a few free agents that have approached us about coming aboard who felt like they were window shopping. They'd ask if they could join the team out of the blue without getting to know us. They'd brag about having been on higher level teams to try and convince us to choose them. One time we told someone no, and they then got a pickup together, asked us for a scrim under a different name, and squidbag obnoxiously whenever they want to fight. It was, of course, no surprise then, that another time when they asked for a scrim, a week went by, the scrim came up, and the team they planned to play with had already disbanded. Once you're teammates with someone, you owe it to yourself to care about them, work with them, and help them. You should want them to be the best they can be. The kind of player who window shops only wants others to see them being the best. They see their teammates as a platform for them to stand on to show off how great they are. If their team is making mistakes or playing poorly, they aren't going to give constructive advice and keep everyone's mindsets positive. They're just going to give up and blame their teammates for not being a high enough platform to stand on for them to reach their own goals. When someone on your team makes a mistake, you should call it out, but do so in a way that's solution-oriented. Don't say something to blame the person, but to solve the problem. Don't blame a loss on someone else to save your own ego. If someone on your team makes a mistake, hold yourself accountable for solving it just as much as them. If I know something you're doing is wrong and I don't tell you about it, that's my fault just as much as yours, because in the end, either of us could have made the team better and chose not to. Committing to your teammates also has the added benefit that you start getting used to playing with them. You can cover for little errors and oddities in someone's playstyle if you know what they'll do ahead of time. I'm bad at calling out when I'm going to Inkjet sometimes, but Debbie's picked up on that, and a lot of the time, she uses ink armor for me even when I didn't think to ask for it. Conversely, sometimes Debbie mixes up left and right when she gets startled by a flank, so if she calls left, 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 and I don't see anything there, I know to look in the opposite direction, and I catch it sometimes. That sort of synergy takes time to develop, and you don't get that time if you're not committed to your teammates. I won't necessarily say it's a good or bad thing we've been together that long. One advantage of being on multiple teams is that you see how different team dynamics work and get a better idea of what's possible. You take things you learned from one team into the next team. Even at the highest level, teams are constantly forming and reforming, so you shouldn't necessarily feel bad if your teams haven't lasted that long a time. But if you do think good things are happening and you really want your team to last, it takes commitment to make it happen. It's fun to pull off a big win, but the feeling of putting together a happy little cult from scratch that goes the distance altogether and pulls off a big win after working their butts off for it, that is what esports is about.
In the championships, and it's in overtime at this point. Tower in the middle, it's not enough, and the back squids come from behind 2-1 to get the victory.